Yeah, welcome to market commentary. What we see in front of us is Nifty index. Now there is one good sign that we saw of bearishness, right? So this is the daily chart of Nifty, and what we are seeing now, Nifty has been going all along one side up. The only point where we now can find some kind of rest in this uptrend, right? So this is the first sign of breaking of the uptrend, which we can see very clearly. Right now, what has happened on the daily time frame, let's understand, and then move out from weekly as well as on 4-hourly chart. What we can see on the daily chart, there has been a continuous support which has been taken place all the way along for Nifty. The last day or the previous day, what we basically saw was a gap up and complete bearishness. So this is not a good sign, which basically shows a sign of reversal. More than that, if we try to see, it is more of an engulfing pattern as well, right? So the 2 candles or 3 candles have been taken out by one full complete candle. Now the most important point to understand, the trend has been breached, number 1. Number 2, what we understand is the base of this complete red candle. So the base of this complete red candle, we can basically plot that and we can keep that as a self-reference. Now what we see over here, which becomes our self-reference, is the base of this red candle. So roughly what I see or understand is clearly that 10,600, or you can say roughly around 10,586 becomes a huge point of our observation. Now what we observe is the couple of candles after this, are they going sideways or are they going up? If they start going up again, then the sign can reverse once again. But if we see multiple candles happening over here on the sideways, the journey of downtrend will remain intact, right? So now obviously after a good sell-off which we saw yesterday, it will take some pause for today, and maybe following after day or so this week we can see a good downside coming through our way. Now how to understand downside may not come, it will only not come if these candles start reversing upwards, right? So after a good sell-off, you will see some consolidation at these levels of 11,550 to 11,600 range. But after that, we can see a good slide down if it doesn't turn up towards the higher side. Now, the most important point, because of the gap up, one thing is pretty much clear, Nifty gets capped at yesterday's gap up point. So 11,735 is now the most important point on the upper resistance side. Right, so this is the resistance which Nifty has to cross for any kind of upward trend. Right, so this cannot be taken out that easily. Right, so this becomes a good point of observation. The most important thing which we had noted prior, it was on the weekly side, but this level of 11,550 to 11,600 range is very, very important. Right, because this is the point where it will take multiple support. Why? Because there were 3 red candles and it opened straight away gap up prior. So this clearly shows, because of this opening gap up and sudden uptick which had taken place, these 3 points will now become your coming around support. So Nifty cannot just go down one way. One thing is pretty clear, it will take some support along these lines, and our observation should be small candles are getting formed around the base, or is it trying to climb upwards? If it tries to climb upwards, then there can be a halt in the downfall, right? And the point is, if it breaches this level, the straight support comes around 10,350 zone, right? Because the rally started from that particular point on the uptrend. And if you see, multiple times support has taken place around this level. So this was the resistance prior, and multiple times it has taken place kind of support around 11,350. So the next downtick on Nifty will straight away come towards 350 zone. So going from 580 around towards 11,370 around. So roughly 200 points of downfall is easily likely. But that straight downfall will not come one way. It might take a couple of days, and then you can see a good downslide of 200 points. So keeping that in view, let's go on the upper time frame. So if I go down towards the weekly format and observe what exactly has happened. Now what I see on the weekly side, the best thing to see, the week has started with a negative note. The trend line still remains intact. Sorry, but what we see on the upper side, now the trend has started trying to go sideways or maybe downside. If I go out and see the prior weekly candles, wherever these engulfing candles have come, we have seen a huge downside. Okay, here also engulfing was there, but there was no downside. After this quick downside, there was an up move which took place, right? So now that's where we are trying to see the slide on the upside was very high and very fast. It is now also giving us a signal of engulfing candle at the upper end, and all we want is to go sideways and straight away down towards 11,350. Now we need to go inside the day as we were trying to see. If it goes sideways, then there are more chances of 11,350. But if it starts going upwards, right? So 11,735 becomes your huge resistance at the upper level. So one level of support comes around 11,370. The second level of support comes somewhere around 11,000 mark. Now if you see on the weekly chart, this is the resistance multiple times and it was taken out. So what do we see? So first level of support comes around 11,360 and the second level of support comes around 11,050. So this is the takeaway for the weekly Nifty. Let's go and see Bank Nifty. Now as we have discussed prior, Bank Nifty is much more bearish compared to Nifty, because what we see over here, the slide was very fast, it went sideways and then we saw a quick up move which took place. The most important point for Bank Nifty is this weekly upper resistance which had taken place, which was somewhere around 27,500 zone. So this becomes your first level of support, right? So this is where we see on the weekly chart. Now something which we had already spotted prior, if you see on the daily chart, something is very interesting. This was the support which had taken place. It went higher, came back down, again went higher, came back down, again went higher. So it consolidated on the upper end 3 times and on the lower end 3 times. The most important level which I had cited prior as well, 27777, right? Why was that important level? Because if I see on the daily side, multiple times support was taken around those levels, right? And as we had noted prior, if it breaches, there is a free fall in Bank Nifty at least towards 27,475. So this is the range where Bank Nifty has to come, and if you see right in the morning itself, the fall has started, because the most important level, as I said, 2777 was multiple level of support. Now if that is taken out, obviously there is more downside to Bank Nifty, almost towards 27,450 zone. The most important to understand, if Bank Nifty is sliding down on the daily side, obviously it will find some support in this range. The next round of downfall can only come towards 27,168. So now we have clear understanding of Bank Nifty as well. If you go out and you see from the top, there was complete gap up bearish, and today also it opened somewhere on the same platform, but it zipped down below 2777. Now it is trying to take Nifty also down towards 27,470. So there is a good fall, even persist even now from these levels, at least 200 points, right? So it will come around these range and it will take some kind of support. So we can only find support in Bank Nifty around this zone, right? So that is number one. Number two, you might get some upside on Bank Nifty and it can slide almost towards 27,100. So if I see on the weekly and on the daily time frame, it becomes very, very clear on Bank Nifty. Because what I see on Bank Nifty on the weekly format, this was the engulfing pattern which was formed and a good downside came through. And then we had never seen engulfing pattern. There were red candles, but they were not eating away the green candles, right? Now what I see suddenly over here, a consolidation on the weekly side on the upper band. Plus you are having a red candle which is eating away all the consolidation. Now because of this consolidation at the upper side, it is very clear a downside is clearly visible. Now the most important point to understand on Bank Nifty, it seems to be bearish because it is moving out or breaking out on the weekly consolidation, number one. Number two, as the important level was 2777, we see one round of support coming around 27,400 and the second round of support coming around 27,100. So these are two zones where it will come and it has to settle around those levels. The most important point to understand is the complete green Moribazu, which was formed around 26,700. So the worst fall for Bank Nifty cannot be below 26,700, right? So it won't reach till there, but even if it reaches, it has to take a quick bounce around these levels, right? So the first level that we understood was breaking from the weekly congestion. Second, it might get a support where multiple resistance was prior, which is around this range of 27,400, and once this is taken out, it can come towards 27,000. So what we see today in Bank Nifty, which is almost around 600 levels, 27,600, it can come towards 27,100. So around 500 points downside is possible on Bank Nifty, number one. If 500 points Bank Nifty goes down, 200 points Nifty will go down. So again, when we go out and see Nifty, we always get a good supporting range for Nifty as well now, because we are seeing that Bank Nifty is weak, but what I see on Nifty, if you take 200 points from the current levels, right, which is 560, it comes around 360. So this is where your multiple support is coming for Nifty as well, right? So this is where we see Bank Nifty, the downside will stop around those range, and Nifty can come around the good supportive range of 11,360 mark, right? So this is what we see on Nifty and Bank Nifty. Now let's go out and see today's stocks. So what we see today, there was good amount of downside, and what we see now, it is almost flat. When I go down and see the gainer and the loser, it's still the IT pack which is zooming up. So Infi, Tech Mahindra, HCL, TCS, Wipro. So only gainers what we see is IT, which is one way up, right? It's very much clear because of the USD INR. Now what we see on the losing side, India Bull, Hindustan Unilever, which has been one of the good uptrending stock, has now suddenly turned down. Yesterday also, on Friday also it was down. Today also it is down by 2%. 2 days it has lost more or less 5% on the downside, right? So this is very, very important. And we also see some of the cement stocks. Now still on the losing side, if we try to see, right, who are the heavyweights? Now if you try to see the heavyweights, it's only Hindustan Unilever, number one. And number two, what we see over here is ITC, right? So ITC has been strong through and through. But what we see now, ITC is giving away its gain, right? So that is not a good healthy sign for Nifty. At least the non-banking stock is a loser, right? So that is very, very important. Now on the gainer side, obviously we are just seeing IT, but if you see even pharma is there, but at least on the supporting side, HDFC, Maruti, Reliance, all three heavyweights are trying to provide some kind of support to Nifty. But Reliance have been sliding from last 2-3 days, and now it is trying to buck the trend. Obviously it is a small bounce, but you can see more downside on Reliance as well. So now things are pretty much clear after this fall. What we can understand on the daily side of Nifty, don't be in hurry just to short Nifty, right? And the most important point I've been saying, Bank Nifty was bearish then Nifty. Second thing which we need to see, it will go 2 days on the sideline, right? And it should not start going upwards. If it doesn't go upwards, then you are seeing a straight 200-300 points downside for Nifty in coming week or so, right? The most important point to understand, the trend has been negated, right? So that basically sees some kind of consolidation at the higher levels will take place before a new trend will emerge, right? So that is more important to understand. And even on the weekly side, what I see is the same thing. It's been going up every week. The candles in the weekly, as we had said in the prior commentary, are weak. The bodies are not that strong. So that basically means there is loss of momentum which is taking place at the higher level. And that is where we see today or this week opening gap up, and it is bearish on the downside. Obviously, it will get some kind of support at every level, but at least we can understand these three candles can be taken out by one red candle. So this week itself, we can see Nifty hanging towards 11,350 zone. Right, so that is where we need to understand from daily to weekly perspective what's happening on Nifty, right? And it is clear understanding or what we are trying to see on Nifty. Now, seeing back to Reliance or the heavyweights which we are there on the Reliance, even on Reliance, we see what has happened continuously. Up move has started taking place. Now, what we see on Reliance, there was a last week where a little slide down happened, and now it is almost at the higher end. Reliance will only become bearish below 1205. It cannot become bearish before 1205. Right, so why is that important level? Because A, it is the base of the Moribazu. The huge buying has taken place. Multiple time it has taken resistance on these levels. Right, so it might come here, it might take a second bounce, kind of a double top formation, and once it goes below this, then you can see a good slide in Reliance on the downside. Right, so keep a watch on these heavyweights, because this will give you a clear understanding on Nifty. Even Hindustan Unilever, what we basically saw on Hindustan Unilever was a continuous upside. If you see, it was a continuous upside. This is a weekly chart, and now it went almost sideways. Even after that red candle, it shooted up, tried to remain higher, and these candles did not have any strength, and it was going almost in the sideways territory. Now what we see in this week, in matter of 2 days, straight away all the gain which has happened was taken out. Right, again for Hindustan Unilever, it might get some support around this range of 1650, but once this is taken out, so after a huge selling, there will be a small bounce. Right, so capture those bounce, let him go up around these levels, let him come back down, and you can see a straight fall. Why? Because the multiple candles which has taken place, again the strength is not there. Right, so the next fall in HUL will also be very brutal. It can come towards 1500 or so. So two good stocks, HUL and Reliance, are at a crucial juncture, right, where they will bounce a bit, which will also keep a little bounce on Nifty. But what we see on the higher end, there is clearly a bigger support range which can be breached, and then you can see a downside, both in HUL and in Reliance. Now the last is your ITC, because these are the non-banking stocks which are providing support to Nifty. Right, so it's a clear understanding. If we have a good hold on them, we can understand where Nifty is headed. Now what we see on ITC, it is clearly a consolidated breakout which has happened on ITC in the last month. Now on the higher end, we are clearly seeing that upper end was 290, which got breached, and straight away it was targeted to go higher every week. It just halted for 1 week, and again what we are seeing over here, a complete bearish engulfing which is taking place. Now, obviously, this structure is not that clear compared to Reliance and HUL, but what we see on ITC, if it is going higher and it tries to eat away this candle, 2 days, 2 weeks, candles are eaten out. Obviously, this is a complete bearish sign. But again, ITC will become bearish only below 302, because this is where the complete green candle ended, and then multiple support took place around these range of 305 to 302. The most important to understand on ITC, it might come down, it might take a bounce, again come down, and once it reaches this level, straight away 288 is on the cards. Right, so when you're seeing ITC, Reliance or HUL, where these kind of gaps which are there, right, which can bring in 200, 300 points Nifty fall, right, which can become free fall even in 3 days. Right, so try to understand where Nifty is headed by these stocks, which is very, very important. If you see the heavyweights or HDFC, so HDFCBANK and HDFC are two important guys, but the most important point to understand on these weekly candles, what we have seen on HDFC, it was at the top, it corrected a lot, right? So what's happening on HDFC is a little bit different than the other guys. What we see over here, red candle, and after that what's happening, it's trying to buck the trend and trying to go on the higher side. This week also it might go higher, but what is happening now, 3 weak candles, right? The bodies are not strong. On the upper end, it has to breach 1968. If it doesn't breaches 1968, you will find one good fall again back towards 1885, right? So the fall can again be very fast in matter of 1 week, and it can come down towards the same level from where the rise started, right? So this is where even you are seeing some kind of HDFC momentum loss taking place. Let's see HDFCBANK. So HDFCBANK is also providing support, and it has corrected a bit. So if you see even on HDFC, the same thing has happened. From the top on the weekly chart, a bearish engulfing took place. After this, what we saw was the candle below the red Moribazu. So the most important point after this was it was going down, and what we now see on the reverse side, there was a good base which was formed around 2025. This is where multiple times selling took place. It took place, and then what happened? A rally happened from those levels. So this is a huge level of support on HDFCBank. But the most important to understand, the fall which is happening, it is losing steam or momentum. The bodies are not that strong, so that will see a quick bounce back towards 2120. But the most important understanding is after this bounce back, it has to cross this for an uptrend. But if this does not happen, again you can see a slide on the downside. So the bank nifty can get support from HDFC Bank, but then the sideways movement of HDFC can basically not provide any support to bank nifty. This is very important for HDFC Bank 2025 range, where it has taken multiple support in that zone. Right, so it should not go past this. It might come down to these levels and have a good bounce on the upside. The last is ICICI Bank, which is also one of the good heavyweights. Now I'm not taking TCS and Infosys. I know already they are trading high. Now what I see on ICICI Bank, if you see from the bottom, it has been rising one way up. The most important point, it is also now like bank nifty in consolidation phase. If you see up and down, it is at least at the base of a good support, right? So multiple support has been taking place around this 330 levels on the weekly side. If it crosses this, straight away towards 323, and if it crosses 320, it is straight away towards 308. So the only guy who can bring bank nifty down one way is ICICI Bank. Consolidating at the higher levels on the weekly side like bank nifty, it has yet not taken a breakout on the downside. So today itself, it can breach these levels of 330. Once it is breached successfully, it can come towards 323, and a bounce back towards 330 levels can bring him down towards 307. So what I see, rather than HDFC being the culprit, I see ICICI Bank basically pushing the nifty, bank nifty down. And then you have Axis Bank. Well, these are the banks which are at the top, Axis and ICICI. And what I see on the Axis Bank. So what I have seen on the weekly candle, just see the kind of upswing which has happened in ICICI and Axis Bank. So this is a clear indication of good downside on Axis Bank rather than ICICI. It's not consolidating at the higher end. What we have seen, loss of momentum of these green candles, bearish engulfing, plus on the upper side tail has been formed. So a gunshot has been formed, weak momentum is taken place, red bearish candle has been in force. The most important point on Axis Bank is same 622. Well, this was the multiple resistance which took place. It crossed this and it took support around those zones. Now what we see is Axis Bank coming around those support range. Now obviously it might find some rest at these points after a good sell-off from 652. And if you see from 667, this guy has been heading down towards 620 or so. So there has been a good slide on Axis Bank. Now, most important point, after this red candle, which basically touches around the support range, it might find good support and might climb up a little higher. But the most important point for Axis Bank, if it breaches 616 kind of levels, you can see further downside in Axis Bank. So what I see is Axis Bank being the most vulnerable, then is the ICICI Bank, and HDFC Bank might go sideways. So the point is again clear, as I had shared in my group, Axis Bank and ICICI are on the bearish side, and bank nifty together itself is on the bearish side. What we see is 3 weak candles on the weekly chart is being taken out by one full red candle. So that's a clear indication of bearish side, right? So that's it for today. We'll connect again tomorrow to understand the levels of Nifty and bank nifty. Thank you for joining.